All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Orange Crush podcast presented by Newton, Scott, and Associates. I want to thank them for their continued sponsorship as well as Herb Tyler and Chick-fil-A. But guys, quite the weekend on hand for the Clemson Regional. If you missed it last night, West Virginia secured the regional in a pretty barn burner-esque fashion, but something notable is that Clemson wasn't there in that regional final. And David, that was quite the weekend that unfolded. Clemson winning a Friday opener against USC Upstate, and then the wheels completely seemingly fell off on Saturday night, only to have the wheels catch on fire and roll down the hill against Kentucky. Pretty disappointing weekend when you look at sort of the standard of Clemson, and we'll get into all of the nitty-gritty details. But David, first impressions from you on what ends up being a very quick postseason for Clemson.
Well, you've been on the receiving end, you and Brandon and everybody else on our Slack channel on TigerNet, of my rants over the past probably 6 weeks about how this team was not talented enough to go very far, right? You guys have seen that, once you kind of get into that point in the season, it was like there's just not enough pitching. There's not enough hitting. I think Eric Bakich said it perfectly, that you look at the stat sheet, it's not a team that's supposed to win 45 games, which is kind of a testament to his coaching and these kids who battled it out, battled to the end. But the defense did not show up at times. The offense disappeared a lot. The pitching was not very good. You had Aiden Canuck as a starter, and then Tittsworth stepped in. He was okay. I don't know that you would describe him as really good or good. It was just okay. He filled a spot. Talon Bell coming back from an injury, a freshman, tried to fill a spot. Not very good. I think he's going to be fine. But I think that's kind of what happened this weekend, is that you have a team that had overachieved, deserved to host a regional, well, by basis of their record, sure. Good enough to host a regional, maybe not. These players, they knew, you kind of piece it together, you get 3 in the third or whatever it was from Jacob McGovern Friday night, and you're going to be in good shape, but you got to win that Aiden Canuck game, because after that, it's going to be piecing it together, Johnny Holstaff type stuff. They did not win that game. There were a couple of head-scratching bullpen decisions by Eric Bakich. I'm kind of the opinion they tried really hard to get Lucas Malstedt that 16th save, so he would have the all-time saves record. And that meant taking a Jacob McGovern out, a batter too early, or taking a Reed Garris out too early. Why can't you just have Malstedt start a ninth inning? I don't know. He would tell you he has his reasons, and, I'm sure they're very valid. But those players knew that once you lost that Canuck game, it was an uphill battle. And even if you win yesterday in that first game, who's pitching? How are you going to win another game and then another game on Monday? You got nobody. Injuries hold the tail. Gillen not able to go. Dane Moeller out at the beginning of the year. Casey Talent out at the beginning of the year. Reed Garris just coming back from injury. Malstedt had thrown a lot of pitches. McGovern had thrown too many pitches, by the time he came in yesterday. Those players knew there was no pitching there.
The body language on Saturday night after the West Virginia loss was pretty telling, and I think obviously you put on a brave face for your program, for your team, for your teammates, and just say, hey, we're going to go out tomorrow. This is the hard way. This is the hard path. We had written about that on TigerNet.com about how things are going to get a lot more challenging for this group. But I think deep down there was a probably subconscious realization that they probably didn't have the stuff to go 3 straight games in a span of a nooner, a 6, and then going again on Monday night, trying to figure out the broken pieces. Sure, you can make the excuse that everybody's pitching tired these days, but man, it felt like once the ball hit the backside of a Kentucky base runner at the bottom of the first to create the 2-2 tie that closed that inning, you felt like that sort of set the tone for the afternoon, and it just got a lot worse and a lot more, I would say comedy of errors is the right way to describe it. I think you had posted a slapstick comedy reference in our Slack channel of just how wacky things had gotten on Sunday afternoon. I think there was a point yesterday, and I posted it on Twitter, that they had more errors than hits. And I think we were 2.5 hours into the game, and that was pretty telling of how things were going. And so Clemson flames out on a Sunday afternoon, falls very short of their Omaha goal, and now it's going to be about picking up the pieces. Who's going to stay? As you and I have both seen, the transfer portal is incredibly volatile. The team a couple hours down the road is experiencing that right now, and a little earlier than everybody else. But Clemson's going to get ready to go here soon, and it'll be about the transfer portal and figuring out who's going to come and try to reconstruct in this roster.
Well, and I think, to me, and this is just talking to baseball people, Eric Bakich took a big swing in the transfer portal last year because he had to. There were some holes that needed to be filled. You had to add another outfielder. Could have added two. You get Colin Priest, you get Luke Gaffney, you get Josh Pano, you get Dom Listy, you get Kissenberth, you get Michael Gillen from Seton Hall, the pitcher, you get Hudson Lee from Wake Forest. That's your portal additions. And Dom Listy worked out fantastic. Colin Priest, a little bit of power, 12 home runs, but a ton of strikeouts. Josh Pano, okay defense over there. He leads the nation in strikeouts. Ole Miss still playing. They've got a kid who could surpass him by playing more games. But 86 strikeouts is just an unbelievable number for one player. Andrew Chufo. In fact, Clemson had 5 of the top 15 ACC strikeout guys. In Chufo, Purify, Priest, Pano, and somebody else. Anyway, but that's just not good. You can't have that many. Oh, Jacob Jarrell. Can't have that many strikeouts and just never put the ball in play. And it was so funny because I'm going back and I'm looking at the stats, and this was actually a week or so ago, and trying to figure out about this team. And I'm like, okay, so how many home runs did they hit? 38 or whatever. Man, back in the day, you had players hitting just about that many. You don't remember this name, Pete Incaviglia, back when the ball was juiced. But just, not a very powerful team. And so I go look at stolen bases, not a lot. Louisville stole almost 100 in the ACC. Clemson about 60-something behind. And then you go look and you go, well, apparently Louisville didn't have the power. No, Louisville hit 20-something more home runs than Clemson. This was, and the offense hit about 270, which is way down the list of teams in the country. Clemson should never be there. He took big swings in the transfer portal. And just like in football recruiting, you can go back and look at every Clemson football class back through the years. About half of those guys are going to be the ones that work out. You sign 28 players, 14 are going to work out. Well, in this case, you can say Listy worked out offensively. Priest was okay, too many strikeouts. Gaffney went, downhill. Pano, he was out there. I mean, that's probably the best thing you can say at times. This is a program that needs to recruit and develop. And everybody's going to be screaming about the transfer portal. But you go out and you get guys who've been at lesser programs. You try and say, okay, I think this guy can play at this level. You're going to have about a 50% success rate. Are you going to throw a lot of money at that? I think this is a program that really needs to concentrate on high school recruiting and developing them, a la football. And then you add a piece or 2 or 3 or whatever you got to do in the portal, not wholesale changes. Now, if you go out there and you got a kid that's pitched at a Power 4 program and has pitched with success, go ahead. But if he's pitched at a lower program and you're just not sure, probably not smart.
Before we get back to this video, we'd like to thank the title sponsor for this podcast, Newton, Scott, and Associates. This team is headlined by Jeff Scott, former Clemson assistant coach and 2-time national champion, as well as Eric Newton, a longtime local and trusted real estate partner. These two are teaming up to provide a first-class experience for all Clemson fans. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or build in the upstate area of South Carolina, you can trust Newton, Scott, and Associates. Choose the same team that Clemson coaches are selecting when they're looking to buy, sell, or build, all the way from Tigertown to Lake Kiowee. For more information, you can find them at newtonscottsc.com or by calling the number 864-722-9062. That's 864-722-9062. Now, let's get back to the video. Yeah, I think there were a lot of people clamoring for the USC Upstate pitcher, but it's sort of the same example of a guy that's not pitching at the P4 level, but maybe you could come in and be a third or a fourth man on the rotation, if that's what you're signing him for. You're not probably signing him up to be your ace, obviously, with Canuck being here, but it's also not even, and this is not based off of any knowledge. It's just the state of how things are in the portal. Things are incredibly volatile. So everyone's sort of on a 1-year contract at this
Well,
point.
Ant Phillips is really good. I like him. That's
Yes,
the kid at
very
Upstate.
good.
I like him. Good fastball, good slider. Clemson made him look a whole lot better than he might be. But yes, he could come in and be a second or a third option somewhere there. He's got 2 years left or 1 year, just depending on how you look at it. I like him a lot. A lot. He could be a guy you could go after. I don't know if Upstate's going to have the money to keep him because a lot of programs are going to come after him now.
Yeah, they watch that.
Yeah, this team, and that kind of goes back to the development part. And now you have to wonder about pitching. You see Kentucky, you see West Virginia. Those were not really, really good teams during the year. And they are just bringing power arms out of the bullpen, right? Guys throwing 95, 96, 97. Doesn't mean you're great. You still have to have control. You still have to have secondary and third pitches. But where are the power arms at Clemson? Where's the pitching? Are they being developed? Is Clemson's pitching program good enough to compete? I don't know. All questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about development and recruiting and some of the conversations that I had in the press box yesterday as the score kept building against Clemson. And you just you look at your story and you're like, okay, this is done. And so I was talking to somebody and they're like, well, when you look at it, and I know Gaffney and Priest have been disappointing, still only sophomores. So maybe you can find a way to develop those two. And obviously, you look at this season in terms of the portal and consider it an overall failure, with the exception of someone like Dominic Listy, who became a fan favorite and had the outreach of support after that game yesterday. But there's still probably hope for those two to potentially develop and build into some caliber of a player that you hoped when you signed them. But still, it's going to come down to high school recruiting. And Bakich had alluded to that yesterday. He said we're really looking at 5 classes all at once, and that there's so many layers to it that they have to look at and evaluate. And he acknowledged it. You need power pitching. You need big swings. You need big bat. You need all the terms that you need to apply to an Omaha-based team. He acknowledged we didn't necessarily have that this year. We had Cam Canarella, Dominic Listy, and Aiden Canuck as sort of your big 3. And that really wasn't enough. And it really isn't enough. You need probably a lot more options. And it's interesting to look at it in that frame. When you say big 3, you think basketball. You can win some championships in other sports off of just 1 or 2 guys. Specifically in basketball, you need more of a collaborative effort. And that's maybe what this team just sort of lacked, was that sort of meshing that never felt like it came together at the right time.
Well, my friend Tom Luganbill, who does a great job on ESPN's football, he and I exchange texts a lot about football players that we see. And one of his favorite terms is JAG, J-A-G, that I get in a text. That stands for just another guy. And Clemson had a lot of JAGs this year on the baseball team. Good kids, good culture kids, but there was one superstar, and that was Cam Canarella. I hate it for him. I think Eric Bakich said it best, hate that he'll never get to shine on the big stage in Omaha. This team, you look at Jack Crichton, you look at Gaffney, Priest, Purified, Jarrell, pieces, right? But still have to go out and find some people, and then obviously pitching, the big deal. Now, they're getting some guys back. I think they're going to send Gillen up to the Cape and see if he can get some confidence back. I think Gillen came back from his injury and was a little bit afraid to let it loose. They tried him out. Maybe it was against NC State. Wasn't good. Tried him out in a midweek game, afraid to let it loose. So they sent him up to the Cape, see if they can get some confidence out of him. Who knows, though, because Gillen has the type of stuff. He may get picked in the Major League Draft. Who knows if he goes up and shines kind of in the Cape. Who knows? So, a lot of pieces out there. It's a hard roster to construct. You don't know if this house settlement's going to go through, or they're going to be 35 scholarships or 11, and a half. Who knows what it's going to be? But we can kind of put a bow on this baseball season and go injuries played, a definite part, and then some misses in the portal that guys just didn't develop or show the way that they had hoped. And you go out and say, well, you've got Eric Bakich, and now he's got to take a look at his coaching staff and see what happens. But for us now, it's kind of like I've been putting on our Slack channel too the past couple of weeks. Grayson, it's June. So for me, that means What happens next month?
What happens next month? I'm thinking about football.
College football starts. That's right, because we're probably within about 40-something days of Dabo Swinney's media outing.
A lot of fun.
Right?
A
And
lot of
we're
fun.
within about 50-something days, 52, 53, 51 days of ACC football kickoff. But you and I have some great football to do this week. You and I'll be around the coaches. We'll be around a lot of the players and a lot of the recruits. Grayson, take us into it. What's happening this week?
Starting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I believe, at 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, is Dabo Swinney's high school football camp, the first of the 2 one-day sessions for what really is the guise of bringing in some of the top prospects in the country that are rising juniors to get a look at them. And so starting tomorrow, we're going to start reporting on not only just sort of how the coaches interact with these players, how certain I think got to get a look at TJ Moore for the first time at one of these camps. And one of the things we had come away with was, holy moly, he's huge. And just sort of the little tidbits you pick up there on the side, along with getting to converse with some of these players after the fact and being like, how was the camp? What was the performance like? And some kids are going to be getting offers. I think June 4th is really a day to look for. A couple players that I really am excited about. Carter Jones is one of them, a 4-star tackle from Virginia. That kid can fly for his size and certainly will be one of the candidates for an offer. Max Brown, who got an offer from Clemson, will be on campus yesterday. Heard a lot of good things on that front, so certainly stay tuned there. The brother of Sammy Brown posted a little highlight reel of his film on Twitter. Not as quick, but you can tell that kid's a film junkie, and there's a lot to like about him. So, David, it's going to be a busy stretch this week, but I think a fun little change of pace given the last couple weeks of baseball.
And I think it's really it's interesting that yesterday on the board, everybody was like, well, what's happening with the commitments? Who's committed? These are usually big weekends. It's been a little bit quieter than usual. I think that is by design. You see this thing fluttering on my shoulder. That means that, of course, Daddy is home with a 4-year-old who is out of school. You probably saw him looking a little ghost in the blur behind me. He wants to get on the podcast. I think we have some good news coming down our way tomorrow, maybe once, maybe twice, who knows. Could be some later tonight, but definitely some good news on the way. We've already talked to some people. We have some stories coming up. Sounds like it was a great visit weekend. I just got a whole load of slobber on my arm for some reason. Not sure why that happened. But yeah, this is going to be a big week. So just to kind of set the stage for everybody, you and I will be out there. There's 2 sessions Tuesday, 2 sessions Wednesday. We take a day off, and then Grayson, what happens Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the overnight camps, and having some experience myself in this little category of the players, you to sort of see what it's like. It's like their official visit, but there are going to be a lot more quarterbacks on site, particularly Peyton Houston on Sunday. I messaged him on Twitter asking when he was coming, and he said that June 8th was the time with a little tiger emoji next to it. He's certainly the top candidate to get one of Garrett Riley's coveted quarterback offers. And this was more the spot where we got to see Tate Reynolds for the first time in action, and really get to see his footwork. And a lot of this it's fascinating because sometimes you don't get a massive opinion off of street clothes, but you can see the quarterback's footwork. How does Garrett Riley interact with some of these guys? You can really tell who's going to get that offer depending on the screen time these players will get. And so this weekend, you sort of build consistency too, as you may see a kid on Friday, and then on Sunday, he's a totally different player because he's been coached by Nick Eason for 3 days. And sort of that kind of personal time makes some of these events really special. And so we'll be boots on the ground. We'll be around. David will be sort of like the mayor of the town where everyone's going to flock to him. And I'll be taking notes along the side, making sure everyone stays aside and gets in line for autographs. But we'll be ready for that too.
I will say this about the visit this weekend. Larry Fitzgerald, the NFL wide receiver, Hall of Fame, what a great wide receiver. His son, Devin Fitzgerald, out of Arizona, is 3-star wide receiver. They were in. I have heard that they had a fantastic time. There were some great conversations. And then another, recruit that I was kind of texting with said, my dad, who his dad has been around football for a long time, said that looking at Clemson's current offensive linemen who were there to kind of help, and then looking at Chancellor Barclay and some of these other guys that Clemson is bringing in, whether they are committed or not, these are the biggest offensive linemen I've ever seen, is what was said. That is the Matt Luke, effect. You wrote about it on Friday. inside kind of Matt Luke's big recruiting weekend. You and I are going to be over there on that side of the building where it's hot, watching the offensive linemen kind of go through their paces, but that is the Matt Luke effect. And I think it's going to be fun. I go back to the days, and I try to tell people about this, when Clemson would sign a guy who weighed 245 pounds. And then it was hopefully by year 3, they've given him enough peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and milkshakes to get him up to 280 or 285 and hope he can play. That was the way it was done, and now they're bringing in guys like Braden Jacobs, who's 6'6", 335, walking out of his parents' car. Come on. And I think that's the way it's going. This is an exciting time. Clemson's recruiting on the upswing. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned the sort of stature. They're bringing in not only different sizes, but versatile players that can move and are specimens for – you mentioned Braden Jacobs, the 335 coming out of his parents' car. He can move like I can't quantify it or put it into like words of how ridiculous. You just have to see it. And I will never forget when my brother went to the spring game and was watching the offensive lineman warming up, and he said, "Who is 74? Holy crap. Like that kid can move." And he's like, he's huge. And so the different type of offensive lineman they're bringing in, it matches sort of the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, the offensive linemen that you see in these national championships now that can play multiple spots, can move. Like it's a different world that Clemson's entering, and I think that's a significant note. Another thing that I had wanted to add before we wrap up on the recruiting end is I spoke with 5-star defensive lineman Bryce Perry-Wright last night. All I got to say, guys, some good news. Some very, very, very successful weekend with him. Very much a sort of Dabo Swinney's personal touch, I think, resonated strongly with this guy. And he's probably going to play it out the rest of the way. But if I had to put a little projection meter, I think someone's going to be a Tiger pretty soon.
All right. Well, it'll all get started tomorrow. We want to thank our sponsors, Newton Scott and Associates. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate that. And, of course, Herb Tyler at Chick-fil-A of Seneca. We've got those logos here up on the screen. Make sure you check everything they've got going on. I've got to go get a haircut later to get ready for vacation. And I will take the 4-year-old by Chick-fil-A to get some nuggets and put a little bit more money in Herb Tyler's pocket.
You're a good man. You're a good man. But guys, this was another episode of the Orange Crush podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to essentially our autopsy of Clemson baseball and a couple recruiting tidbits here and there. But guys, thank you for tuning in. Subscribe for more throughout the week, and we'll try to get another podcast in before David gets lost in the woods in Colorado. But thank you so much for tuning in, and God bless y'all. Take care.